I'm going to share with you information about a couple of projects that we worked on last year. Both of these were sponsored by the United Soybean Board. The one that's going to take up the bulk of the time, the second two-thirds of the presentation, focuses on regulations. The first third is going to be some broad information about animal agriculture and the benefits. So, in effect, what we have is a sort of good story, bad story kind of flow through the presentation. A little bit more detail on the actual studies and what we're trying to achieve. The first one is we update a database on an annual basis of all the positive impacts of animal agriculture on a state-by-state basis and for the nation as a whole. The second study we did was really focusing more on regulations. We sort of cast a wide net. What sorts of pressure is there for different types of regulations? What would those cost? What evidence we'd have out there that may help quantify those costs for us? And we also took a look at a couple of different systems. So we looked at production and costs in the US. We also looked at Mexico and Brazil. They're very different. Mexico is a huge customer of ours for animal products, but they also do some exporting. They really don't have the sort of the crop resources that we do, so they have to import a lot of that too. So in a sense, they're more of an importer than a direct competitor in many cases. Brazil, on the other hand, is a huge competitor both in terms of crops and animal products. And finally, the last piece we were looking at was food safety. So what happens, the theme was sort of, well, what happens if we start putting regulations on animal agriculture here and we end up driving up costs to our producers, so some of production ends up going to other countries? What then is the impact in terms of costs for our own consumers, and what might happen in terms of food safety? Because we'd be importing more products. To give you a sense of where we were getting our information, so for the database, the benefits study, we were pulling information from the National Agricultural Statistics Service. We were taking some multipliers from the Department of Commerce that helped us calculate the impact of the benefits. And we also, then for the second study, we were looking at all sorts of data. We were looking at case studies from overseas. We were looking at anything where we had documentation or some sort of assessment of costs of regulations. We also made some assumptions about sort of what types of costs might be imposed on producers. And we then used price elasticities, which basically says if prices go up a certain amount, how is demand affected? How much does demand to go down? To try to calculate the cost impact on consumers. All right, so the good news first, well, mostly good news. So animal agriculture, it's huge, grew substantially for the most part between 2000 and 2010. There was the downturn during the recession, but production for the most part, for most categories, has bounced back. Cattle production was the one area we looked at cattle and beef, pork, poultry, eggs, milk. And cattle was the one area that was down over the 10-year period. Pork production was up 18%, broiler production similarly. Turkey production was up slightly, egg production up, and milk also up. So over the next dozen slides, we're going to go quickly through so you can get a picture as to what's happened. Cattle, as I mentioned, is the one area that has declined nationally 3% over the last 10 years. There's been some volatility, typically a couple of percentage points a year. Now you're going to see a number of maps like these. So these show what's happened over the 10-year period on a state-by-state basis in terms of cattle production. There's been shades of green here indicate growth, and red and pink decline. The stronger the shade, the stronger the effect. So light green is modest growth, dark green strong growth, dark red is strong decline, to give you a sense of what's going on. So as you can see here, this also only reflects percentages. So if you take, for example, in the Northeast, we see a lot of red. Hawaii is a dark green, but those are fairly small herds. So in the overall picture, they're not as important. But overall, you can see that there's been substantial decline throughout much of the country, and some areas have seen some growth as well. Right, so nationally, hog production has increased by over 18% over the past decade. Production peaked in 2008 at just over 31 billion pounds, declined slightly in 2010. The numbers for 2011 typically come out toward the end of April. So we don't have those for 2011 yet. Okay, so here you begin to see a shift, and this will be a theme that comes up over the next several minutes.